The Pontians used underground tactical bears against Roman soldiers. Around 71 BC, Roman legions under the command of consul Lucius Lucullus laid siege to the Pontic city of Themyscira. Yes, the same one where, according to legends, the beautiful Amazon warriors lived. Legionaries, having examined the city and its defenders from afar, did not find muscular beauties, expectedly upset and decided Themyscira leveled to the ground. However, the assault did not yield anything. The walls of the city were strong and high, the defenders fought bravely, and the army made a temporary retreat. The siege began. The Romans were experienced masters of positional warfare. They had an engineering force that specialized in digging. On Lucullus's orders, the engineers dug a tunnel under the walls of Themyscira so that the soldiers could penetrate behind the walls. But the Ponians noticed the tunnel, and when the legionaries began their attack, they made holes in the ceiling of the tunnel and threw some bears down there. Yes, you heard right. Naturally, the Romans were not at all happy about them. The battle between the Romans and the beasts of war was described by the ancient author Appian, but he didn't mention whether they were the standard armament of the Ponticians or whether they were hastily recruited in the nearest menagerie on a voluntary and compulsory basis. Either way, the bears were doing a good job. The skin of a large animal cannot be taken with a gladius or a pilum at once. And as if the tactical bear cavalry wasn't enough, the inhabitants of the besieged city also threw a few beehives into the Roman passages. Well, to add to the fun and excitement. In the end, the attack collapsed. After reinforcements came to the besiegers, who were leaving to defeat the army of King Mithridates VI at the city of Cabira, Themyscira fell and was destroyed. Marie Antoinette begged pardon from her executioner. Everyone knows the phrase allegedly uttered by the French Queen Marie Antoinette when she was informed of starving commoners. If they have no bread, let them eat cakes. She never actually said such a thing, but here are her last words recorded accurately. Marie Antoinette was executed on the guillotine on October 16, 1793 at exactly 12:15 p.m. As she climbed the scaffold, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot and said, "Forgive me, Monsignor, I didn't do it on purpose." That's what it means to be raised by a real lady. The British taught seagulls to defecate on German U-boats' submarines, which began to be used en masse during the First World War, completely changed the rules of naval battles. And the most dangerous and technically advanced vessels of this type at the time were German submarines. At the beginning of the war, Germany had only 28 such submarines, but despite this, they demonstrated extremely high efficiency in the fight against the British fleet. Submarines attacked suddenly, sinking ships left and right, and with them virtually nothing could not be done. In 1916, the first weapon against them was invented: depth bombs, but sonar was still 2 decades away. Therefore, German U-boats were invisible even to the most advanced military vessels of the time. They did what they wanted, attacking even neutral and merchant ships without warning. The British, losing ships one after another, decided that they had had enough and began to look for ways to fight back. Fortunately, without sonar and submarines were practically blind in combat. All they could do was to detect with their periscopes some ship floating carelessly nearby and then fire torpedoes in its direction. So the German boat could be detected by the observation tubes sticking out of the water, and the British took advantage of this. Teams of British naval sailors in small boats patrolled their waters. These fighters were armed with the latest anti-submarine systems of their day. When they spotted a periscope, they stealthily swam up, threw a canvas bag over it, and smashed the eyepieces with sledgehammers. The Germans, sounding the placid depths of the sea with furious profanity, returned to their port for repairs, and practically by feel. It is reported that, for example, the captain of the destroyer HMS Exmouth specially recruited blacksmiths because they were better at swinging hammers than the average sailors. However, even this tactic had disadvantages. The periscope is still to be seen, especially if there are even the slightest waves on the sea. Therefore, the British were always looking for a way to make enemy subs more visible. For example, the Royal Admiralty hired a sea lion trainer named Joseph Woodward to teach his pets to search for submarines and shout their location. The program was ineffective, however, and British Admiral Frederick Samuel Inglefield proposed a new idea. At his behest, a training facility was built in Poole Harbour, not the same as Pearl Harbor, where ornithologists purposely trained seagulls to detect and decloak underwater vessels. The seabirds were fed over mock-ups of submarines, cultivating the association "submarine means food." Flocks of hungry gulls were expected to fly over the submarines, giving away their location. In addition, the birds' feces were supposed to stain the lenses of the periscopes, impairing the Germans' visibility. The training of the birds lasted almost a year, but later the project was cancelled for lack of use. It turned out that it was more effective to escort merchant ships by destroyers with deep-sea bombs than to hope that a stupid seagull would detect a submarine and start to bombard its eyepieces with droppings. Since 1917, no merchant ship had left port without a convoy, and German submarine attacks had become much rarer. In addition, British and American spy planes began patrolling the seas. Although they could not destroy submarines, only one submarine was sunk by an air attack during the war. In their presence, they were forced not to raise their periscopes from the water, remaining blind and helpless. The winner of the 1904 Olympic marathon was carried to the finish line in his arms. On August 30th, 1904, the city of St. Louis, USA, hosted a track and field competition that was organized just out of hand. Therefore, the events that happened at the marathon resemble a bad anecdote. 32 athletes took part in the 40-kilometer marathon, but only 14 reached the finish line. The race was held on a very bad road. It was not blocked for cars, and passing cars raised pillars of dust. Several athletes were on the verge of death because of it, suffering internal bleeding and lung damage. Others fainted due to the 32 degrees Celsius heat and dehydration. The first to finish was the American runner Frederick Lortz. As it turned out, he became ill during the race, and he was picked up by a coach in a car. Lortz was brought almost to the finish line, but he, having recovered, got out of the car, deciding to walk. And suddenly he crossed the finish line. The athlete was immediately honored and given a medal, but he admitted that he had made a mistake, and he was chased away, booed and suspended for 6 months from competition. Britain's Thomas Hicks came in second. This one had already run relatively honestly, at least most of the way, so he was recognized as the real winner. Although Hicks, as was common among runners in those days, was doping, several trainers ran with him, pouring cognac and rat poison into his mouth along the way. At the time, strychnine was believed to have a tonic effect and was generally incredibly beneficial. By the time Hicks reached the finish line, he was hallucinating and could barely move, poisoned by alcohol and strychnine. His coaches literally carried him, holding him by the shoulders, and the athlete was unconsciously flailing his legs in the air, thinking he was still running. He was immediately taken away in an ambulance and barely recovered. Also among the finishers was a simple Cuban letter carrier named Felix Carvajal, who joined the marathon at the last second. He raised the funds for his marathon participation by participating in money races all over Cuba. But on his way to the Olympics, Carvajal lost all his cash at a craps game in New Orleans and had to hitchhike to St. Louis. Felix did not even have money left for equipment, and he ran in ordinary clothes, a shirt, shoes, and pants. The latter were shortened with a pocket knife by a passing Olympian, a discus thrower. Finally, 2 black African students, Len Taunyane and Ian Mashiane, participated in the marathon. The Africans joined the race because they were passing by and noticed the athletes preparing, and they decided that we were no worse. Ian came 12th, but Len could have taken the prize, but 2 factors prevented him. The first was that he ran barefoot because he didn't have shoes with him. The second, an aggressive stray dog followed him halfway, and he was forced to seriously deviate from his route. A piece of Queen Victoria's wedding cake has been kept as a relic for almost 200 years. On February 10, 1840, Queen Victoria of England married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha. The happy newlyweds were served a sumptuous wedding cupcake, weighing 300 pounds or about 136 kilograms. But there was a snag. The bride was on a diet. The guests were not hungry. In general, to eat a cake weighing more than a centre no one wanted to. After the ceremony, Victoria ordered to cut it into pieces, seal it in tin boxes, and distribute it to acquaintances. friends, and just random people. You see, the custom of giving departing guests uneaten pieces for the road existed even at the royal court, but not all of the owners of a piece of such a cake were ready to use it for its intended purpose. It is, after all, a gift from her monarchy, and you want to eat it. The slices were left as a memento, and it so happened that some of them have survived to this day. To this day, slices of Victoria's wedding cake are of great value to antiquities enthusiasts. Thus, a couple of such slices are kept as a relic in the Royal Trust art collection. Another small slice was bought at auction in 2016 for $1,500. If you think that's a lot of money, here's some information for comparison. In 1998, Sotheby's auction sold for $29,900 a piece of cake from the wedding of King Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson, which happened in 1937. Fresh, you might say, and the best part, because of its high alcohol content, Victoria's cake is still edible, at least theoretically. And that's it. Write in the comments what else I have to tell you. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Good luck for everyone and bye-bye.